Rachel Bennett's hands trembled as she stared at the divorce papers on the coffee table. Tears blurred her vision as she picked up the pen and signed her name on the line that would end her 5-year marriage. Hello family, welcome back. Please take a moment to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. It truly means a lot to us. Don't forget to share it with your friends and loved ones and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. So sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Her husband Jason walked toward the door without looking back. "I don't love you anymore, Rachel," he had said minutes earlier. "I'm in love with someone else." After he left, Rachel stumbled to the bathroom and saw the pregnancy test on the counter. 2 pink lines staring back at her. She had planned to surprise him with the news. Now it felt like a cruel joke. With trembling hands, she tore the test into tiny pieces and watched them fall into the trash. She grabbed one small suitcase, left the house with $300, and walked away from everything she had ever known. But 3 weeks later, something far worse would happen that would nearly destroy her completely. Rachel found a tiny studio apartment on the rough side of town. The walls were thin, the heating barely worked, and cockroaches scattered when she turned on the lights. But it was all she could afford. She cried herself to sleep every night, clutching her stomach and whispering to the baby growing inside her. "We'll be okay," she promised. "Somehow we'll survive this." She got a job at a small diner called Rosie's, waiting tables for minimum wage plus tips. Her feet ached by the end of each shift, but she smiled at customers and saved every penny she could. Mrs. Parker, the kind owner, noticed Rachel's sadness but never asked questions. "You're a hard worker, sweetie," she would say, patting Rachel's shoulder. Rachel never told anyone about Jason, about the baby, or about how broken she felt inside. 3 weeks after moving into the apartment, Rachel woke up at 2 in the morning with sharp, stabbing pains in her stomach. She tried to stand but collapsed on the floor, gasping in agony. Blood soaked through her nightgown. Terror gripped her heart as she realized what was happening. "No, no, no," she whispered, crawling toward her phone. "Please, not my baby. Please, God, not my baby." She dialed emergency services with shaking fingers. "I need help," she sobbed into the phone. "I'm pregnant and something's wrong. There's so much blood." The ambulance arrived 15 minutes later. Paramedics lifted her onto a stretcher while neighbors peeked through their doors. At the hospital, a young doctor with tired eyes examined her and then held her hand gently. "I'm so sorry, Miss Bennett," he said softly. "You've had a miscarriage. We did everything we could, but the baby is gone." Rachel stared at the white ceiling, feeling completely empty inside. She had lost her husband, her home, her future, and now her baby. She was utterly alone in the world with nothing left to live for. The nurse brought her paperwork to sign before discharge. Rachel's hand could barely hold the pen. When she returned to her tiny apartment, she lay on the cold floor in the darkness and didn't move for 2 days. She didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't cry. She just existed in a hollow, painful silence. On the 3rd day, hunger forced her to stand. She looked at herself in the cracked bathroom mirror and saw a ghost staring back. But somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark refused to die. Could a woman who had lost absolutely everything somehow find the strength to rebuild? And would the man who destroyed her ever face the consequences of what he had done? Rachel sat on the floor of her apartment with a cheap laptop she had bought from a pawn shop for $50. She had $43 left to her name, and rent was due in 12 days. The grief still crushed her chest every morning when she woke up, but she refused to give up completely. She typed into the search bar with determination, "Free online business courses." One link led to another, and soon she was enrolled in classes about marketing, finance, web design, and business management. Every night after her shift at the diner, Rachel studied until 3 in the morning. Her eyes burned with exhaustion, but she kept going. During the day, she served coffee and pancakes to customers, smiling even though her heart was shattered into a million pieces. After 2 months of intense studying, Rachel created a simple website offering freelance marketing services. She called her business Bennett Strategies, and charged low prices to attract her first clients. A local bakery hired her to design social media posts for $75. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. She worked every free moment she had, during her lunch breaks, on the bus, late into the night. Slowly, word spread about her skills. More small businesses hired her. 6 months passed and Rachel's freelance work grew steadily. She moved to a slightly better apartment with working heat and no cockroaches. 1 year passed and she hired her first employee, a college student named Lily who needed part-time work. 2 years passed, and Bennett Strategies had 15 employees working with small businesses across the country. Rachel had transformed her pain into power and her grief into unstoppable determination. But late at night, when the office was quiet and empty, Rachel still thought about Jason. She wondered if he was happy with Vanessa, the woman he had left her for. She wondered if he ever thought about their marriage or if he had completely forgotten the woman whose heart he had broken. Sometimes she drove past their old house and saw lights on in the windows. She imagined him living the perfect life while she had suffered alone through the worst pain imaginable. Those thoughts filled her with a burning fire that pushed her to work even harder. She would show him. She would show everyone. One evening, Rachel was reviewing financial reports in her office when Lily rushed in looking excited. "Boss, you absolutely need to see this," Lily said breathlessly, placing a newspaper on the desk. The headline read, "Sterling Industries faces financial crisis. Family business on brink of collapse." Rachel's breath caught in her throat. Sterling Industries was Jason's company, the business he had inherited from his wealthy father and always bragged about during their marriage. She read the article carefully, absorbing every detail. The company was drowning in massive debt, losing major clients every month, and desperately searching for investors to save it from bankruptcy. Jason's face was in the photograph, looking stressed and much older than she remembered. Rachel stared at the newspaper for a long time as an idea began forming in her mind. It was dangerous, risky, and would require everything she had built over the past 3 years. But if she succeeded, she would own the one thing Jason valued more than anything else in the world: his precious family company. A cold smile spread across Rachel's face. "Lily," she said quietly, her voice filled with steel, "schedule an emergency meeting with our entire financial team. Tell them to clear their calendars for the next 6 months. We have very important work to do." Over the following year, Rachel worked in complete secrecy, moving like a ghost through the business world. She sold part of Bennett Strategies to investors, took out carefully calculated loans, and partnered with venture capitalists who believed in her vision. Piece by piece, share by share, she bought stock in Sterling Industries through anonymous shell companies and offshore accounts that couldn't be traced back to her. Jason never knew who was slowly, methodically taking control of his empire. Would he recognize the broken woman he had thrown away when she finally revealed herself? Rachel stood outside the Sterling Industries headquarters, staring at her reflection in the glass doors. She wore a sharp black designer suit, her hair styled elegantly, her eyes cold and focused like a predator. 5 years had passed since she had signed those divorce papers with tears streaming down her face. The broken, desperate woman who had begged Jason not to leave was gone forever. In her place stood someone completely new, someone powerful, wealthy, and in complete control. She walked through the marble lobby with confidence, her expensive heels clicking sharply against the floor. Employees glanced at her with curiosity, wondering who this mysterious woman was. Rachel rode the elevator to the top floor where the executive boardroom waited. Her lawyer, Mr. Thompson, stood by the door looking nervous. "They're all inside," he whispered. "Jason still doesn't know anything. Are you absolutely sure you're ready for this?" Rachel took a deep breath and smiled coldly. "I've been ready for 5 years." The boardroom fell completely silent when Rachel walked through the door. 12 men in expensive suits sat around a long conference table, and at the head sat Jason. He looked much older now, with deep stress lines around his eyes and streaks of gray in his dark hair. He glanced up at her with mild confusion, clearly not recognizing her at first. Then his eyes widened in complete shock and his face turned ghost white. "Rachel?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. She smiled coolly and walked to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table. "Hello, Jason. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you all for attending this emergency meeting. My name is Rachel Bennett, and as of yesterday afternoon, I officially own 51% of Sterling Industries. That makes me the majority shareholder and the new controlling authority of this entire company." The room exploded with shocked whispers and confused voices. Jason stood up so quickly his chair fell backward. "That's impossible," he shouted. "How could you possibly? How could I possibly afford it?" Rachel interrupted calmly, her voice steady and strong. "Let's just say I've been extremely busy these past 5 years while you were enjoying your new life with Vanessa." Mr. Thompson began distributing thick folders to everyone at the table. Rachel continued speaking, never breaking eye contact with Jason's stunned face. "This company is failing because of terrible management, outdated business strategies, and frankly embarrassing financial decisions. Under my leadership, things will change immediately and dramatically. I'm restructuring the entire operation from top to bottom, starting with the executive team." For the next hour, she outlined her detailed plans with precision and authority. She would cut unnecessary costs, fire incompetent managers who had been coasting for years, bring in talented new employees, and rebuild relationships with the major clients Jason had neglected. The board members listened carefully, many nodding in agreement as they realized her plan was brilliant. Jason sat back down slowly, looking like he was watching a nightmare unfold before his eyes. When the meeting finally ended, everyone filed out of the room except Jason. He remained in his seat, staring at Rachel like she was a ghost he couldn't believe was real. "How did you do this?" he asked quietly, his voice filled with disbelief. Rachel stood and gathered her expensive leather briefcase. "I learned that the only person I could ever truly depend on was myself. You taught me that lesson, Jason. I should probably thank you for it." She walked toward the door with perfect posture, but his desperate voice stopped her. "Rachel, please wait. I need to say something. I was a complete fool. I was selfish, blind, and stupid, and I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm so sorry." Rachel slowly turned around and looked at him with eyes that held no anger, no hatred, only complete indifference. "Your apology is 5 years too late, Jason. And honestly, I don't even care anymore." She walked out and left him sitting alone in the boardroom he no longer controlled, his entire empire now in the hands of the woman he had once thrown away like garbage. But as Rachel rode the elevator down, her heart felt strangely empty. Was owning everything Jason valued really the victory she had imagined for so long? Or was there something else she still needed to find? Rachel threw herself into running Sterling Industries with fierce determination and brilliant strategy. Within 3 months, she had completely turned the struggling company around. She fired lazy executives who had been stealing money, hired talented professionals with fresh ideas, and personally rebuilt relationships with major clients Jason had ignored. The business press called her a miracle worker and a genius. Headlines read, "Mystery CEO Saves Sterling Industries," and "Rachel Bennett, the woman who came from nowhere to the top." But despite all her success, something felt wrong. Every night, Rachel returned to her beautiful penthouse apartment overlooking the city and sat alone in the silence. She had everything she once dreamed of: wealth, power, respect, revenge. Yet she felt hollow inside, like she was still missing something important. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out an old envelope she had kept hidden for years. Inside were the torn pieces of the pregnancy test she had saved from that terrible day. She hadn't looked at them since the miscarriage. Now she carefully laid them out on her mahogany desk like puzzle pieces of a life that never happened, a baby that never got to exist. Assistant buzzed her office intercom. "Ms. Bennett, Jason Westbridge is here in the lobby. He says he desperately needs to speak with you. Should I send him away?" Rachel hesitated for a long moment, then sighed. "No. Send him up." Jason entered her office looking humble and defeated. He no longer wore expensive designer suits or carried himself with arrogance. He looked like a man who had lost everything that mattered. "Thank you for seeing me," he said quietly, standing nervously by the door. Rachel gestured coldly to a chair across from her desk. "What do you want, Jason?" He sat down slowly and stared at his hands. "I wanted to tell you that Vanessa and I divorced 6 months after our wedding. She left me the moment the company started failing and the money dried up. I realized too late that she only wanted my wealth and social status, not me. Everything I thought I wanted turned to dust in my hands." Rachel felt absolutely nothing hearing this news. Once, it might have given her satisfaction. Now it just seemed pathetic and sad. "I'm sorry that happened to you," she said simply, her voice emotionless. Jason looked up at her with desperate, pleading eyes. "Rachel, I threw away a real diamond to chase after fake gold that turned out to be worthless plastic. You were always there for me, loyal, kind, supportive, loving. And I was too stupid and blind to see your incredible worth. I know I don't deserve any forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I finally understand what I lost." Rachel was quiet for a long moment, studying his broken face. "Do you want to know what really happened after you left me?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Jason nodded, looking confused. Rachel's voice remained steady and controlled, though the words were incredibly painful to say out loud. "I was pregnant, Jason. I found out the same day you asked for the divorce. I was going to surprise you that night over a romantic dinner I had planned." Jason's face went completely white, like all the blood had drained from his body. "Rachel, no, please tell me you're not saying," she held up her hand to stop him. "I lost our baby 3 weeks later. I had a miscarriage alone in a terrible hospital, and I had absolutely nothing left. No husband, no home, no family, no money, no future, no hope. I wanted to die, Jason. I seriously considered ending my life because the pain was unbearable. Tears rolled down Jason's face as he covered his mouth in horror. Oh God, Rachel. Oh my God. I'm so sorry. If I had known, if you had known, would it have changed anything? Rachel interrupted. Would you have stayed with me out of obligation? Out of guilt? That's not love, Jason. That's a prison. She stood and walked to the massive window, looking out at the city sparkling below. I don't tell you this story to make you feel guilty or to punish you. I tell you so you understand exactly who you're looking at right now. The woman you divorced doesn't exist anymore. That Rachel died alone in that hospital room. The person standing here is someone completely new. Someone who learned the hard way that she never needed you or anyone else to be whole and complete. Jason wiped his eyes and stood slowly. I know I have absolutely no right to ask this, but is there any chance we could ever? No, Rachel said firmly but not unkindly. That door is closed and locked forever, Jason. I don't hate you. I don't even think about you most days anymore. I've simply moved on to a better life. Jason nodded slowly, accepting his fate, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back one last time. For whatever it's worth, I'm genuinely proud of what you've become. You're absolutely extraordinary, Rachel. After he left, Rachel returned to her desk and stared at the torn pregnancy test pieces scattered across the surface. She suddenly realized that holding on to these physical remnants of her pain was preventing her from finding true peace and real freedom. It was finally time to let everything go, not just Jason but all the hurt, all the anger, all the what-ifs and might-have-beens that still haunted her dreams. But how do you finally release a past that shaped absolutely everything you became? That weekend, Rachel drove 2 hours to a quiet, isolated beach outside the city. She carried a small metal box containing everything from her past with Jason, the torn pregnancy test pieces, their wedding photograph, and a long letter she had written to him years ago but never had the courage to send. The beach was completely empty except for seagulls crying overhead and waves crashing against the shore. Rachel walked slowly to the water's edge and sat down on the cool sand, holding the box in her lap. She opened it carefully and looked at each item one final time. The wedding photo showed 2 young people smiling brightly, completely unaware of the terrible pain that waited in their future. The torn test pieces reminded her of the baby she would never hold, never kiss, never watch grow up. The letter was filled with words of anger, betrayal, and hurt written by a woman who no longer existed. Rachel pulled out a silver lighter from her jacket pocket and took a deep, shaky breath. She set the wedding photograph on fire first, watching as the flames consumed the smiling faces and turned them to ash. I release you from my heart, she whispered to the wind. You no longer have any power over me. Next, she burned the letter, watching all her old pain and rage turn to smoke and float away. I forgive you for what you did, Jason. And more importantly, I forgive myself for loving someone who couldn't love me back. Finally, with trembling hands, she burned the torn pregnancy test pieces. This was by far the hardest thing to let go. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered to the memory of her lost child. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm so sorry you never got to live and experience this beautiful world. But I promise your brief life had meaning. You gave me a reason to survive when I wanted to die. You made me stronger. Thank you, my baby. Rest in peace. The ashes scattered in the ocean breeze, carried away over the water toward the horizon. Rachel sat there for over an hour, feeling lighter and freer than she had felt in 5 long years. The crushing weight she had carried was finally gone, lifted away by the wind and waves. On Monday morning, Rachel called an emergency board meeting at Sterling Industries. The executives gathered nervously, whispering and wondering what shocking announcement she would make now. Rachel stood confidently at the head of the long table, looking at each worried face. I've made an important decision about the future of this company and my role in it, she began calmly. Sterling Industries is completely stable now, highly profitable, and positioned perfectly for long-term success. But I will not be the person leading it forward into the future. Shocked gasps and confused whispers filled the elegant room. I'm officially stepping down as CEO and selling all my shares. Every dollar of profit will be used to fund a new charitable foundation I'm creating called the Rise Initiative. It will provide completely free business education, personal mentorship, and financial support to women and young girls who want to build their own futures and escape difficult situations. The board members looked absolutely stunned. One older man asked, "But why would you walk away? You've worked so incredibly hard to build all of this." Rachel smiled peacefully. I didn't build this company for revenge or power or money. I built it to prove something to myself, that I could survive anything, that I was worthy and valuable, that I was enough exactly as I am. Now I know the truth deep in my soul. It's time to help other women discover their own strength. After the meeting ended, Rachel sent a private message to Jason asking him to meet her one final time. They met at a quiet coffee shop far from the business district, away from the corporate world they had both inhabited. Jason looked at her with deep sadness and genuine respect. "I heard about your decision to leave Sterling Industries," he said softly. "The Rise initiative is truly beautiful, Rachel. You're going to change thousands of lives for the better." She nodded, appreciating his words. "I wanted to see you one last time because I have something important to give you." She handed him a crisp white envelope with one single word written on it in elegant handwriting: "Closure." Jason opened it carefully with shaking hands. Inside was a simple card that read, "You didn't break me, Jason. You freed me from a life that was too small for who I was meant to become. Thank you for showing me who I never wanted to be so I could transform into who I was always meant to be. This is goodbye forever. I genuinely wish you well." Jason looked up with tears streaming down his face. "You really are completely letting go of everything." "Yes," Rachel said with complete peace in her voice. "And you should do the same. Let me go, Jason. Move forward with your life." She stood gracefully, gave him one last small smile filled with forgiveness, and walked out of the coffee shop into the bright sunshine. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, Rachel felt something she hadn't felt in 5 long years: complete and total inner peace. The broken woman who had signed those divorce papers in tears was gone forever, buried in the past where she belonged. In her place was someone reborn, someone powerful, and someone finally, truly, wonderfully free. But would this freedom last? And what would her new life look like now? 6 months later, the Rise Initiative officially opened its doors in a renovated building in downtown Seattle. The space buzzed with positive energy as young women attended business classes, met with successful mentors, and worked passionately on turning their dreams into reality. Rachel walked slowly through the bright hallways, watching girls who reminded her so much of herself years ago, scared but hopeful, broken but determined, lost but fighting to find their way. One young woman named Grace approached her shyly after a morning class. "Ms. Bennett, I just wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart," Grace said, her eyes filled with grateful tears. 3 months ago, I was sleeping in my car with my baby daughter, completely hopeless. Now I have a real apartment and I'm starting my own bakery business. You saved my life." Rachel hugged her warmly, feeling deep emotion. "No, Grace. You saved your own life. I just gave you some tools and believed in you. Your courage and hard work did everything else." This feeling right here was the real victory she had been searching for all along. Not revenge, not power, not money, but genuine purpose and meaning. Lily, who had stayed loyal to Rachel through everything and still worked as her executive assistant, found her in the office later that afternoon. "There's someone downstairs asking to see you," she said with a slight hesitation in her voice. "It's Jason." Rachel looked up, genuinely surprised. "Send him up, please." Jason entered carrying a large manila envelope and looking healthier than she had seen him in years. He seemed more at peace with himself. "I'm sorry to show up without calling first," he said apologetically. "But I wanted to deliver this to you personally." He handed her the envelope. Inside were official legal documents transferring complete ownership of a valuable property. "What is this?" Rachel asked, confused. Jason smiled warmly. "It's the old Sterling warehouse building on 5th Street downtown. It's been sitting empty for years, just wasting space. I thought the Rise Initiative could use it, maybe as a second location or a community center for the women you help. Consider it my personal contribution to the incredible good you're doing in the world." Rachel was genuinely touched by the gesture. "Jason, this is extremely generous. Thank you so much." He nodded humbly. "It's honestly the least I can do after everything. You've truly inspired me, Rachel. I'm volunteering now 3 days a week, working with a nonprofit organization that helps struggling small businesses stay afloat. I'm trying hard to become a better man than I was." They talked casually for about 20 minutes about their completely separate lives, like old acquaintances politely catching up after years apart. There was no tension between them anymore, no lingering hurt or resentment. Just two people who had once known each other intimately now moving forward peacefully on very different paths. Before Jason left, he paused at the office door and turned back. "I hope you find someone special who truly deserves you, Rachel. Someone who recognizes and appreciates your worth right from the very beginning." Rachel smiled softly and warmly. "I already found that person, Jason. I found myself." After he left, Rachel stood by the large window looking out at the beautiful city skyline. She thought about the terrified girl she used to be 5 years ago, crying alone on that cold apartment floor, absolutely convinced her life was completely over and not worth living. If she could somehow travel back in time and tell that broken girl just one thing, it would be this simple truth. The worst day of your entire life will eventually become the first day of your powerful new life. Everything happens for a reason, even when we can't see it. She pulled out her phone and looked at a recent photo from the Rise Initiative's grand opening ceremony last month. Dozens of smiling, hopeful faces looked back at her. Women and girls from all different backgrounds who now believed in themselves and their futures because someone had finally believed in them first and given them a real chance. Rachel's assistant knocked softly and poked her head through the door. Your next meeting starts in 10 minutes. It's the young entrepreneurs from the Southside Mentorship Program. Rachel grabbed her leather notebook and headed confidently toward the conference room. As she walked through the building she had created with purpose and love, past the inspiring faces of women actively building their own futures, she realized something absolutely profound that took her breath away. Jason leaving hadn't destroyed her. The devastating miscarriage hadn't destroyed her. The poverty, loneliness, and unbearable pain hadn't destroyed her. All of those terrible experiences had actually been fuel for the fire that forged her into exactly who she was always meant to become. She had signed those divorce papers while crying, torn up a pregnancy test in complete despair, and walked away from her old life with nothing but devastating heartbreak and empty pockets. But she hadn't stayed broken and defeated. She had risen from the ashes like a phoenix. And now she was teaching other women to rise too. Rachel Bennett had finally learned the greatest truth of all, that the painful end of one story is simply the beginning of another, better story. And her new story, the one where she was the confident hero of her own beautiful life, was just getting started. The rest was still unwritten, full of endless possibilities, and for the first time in her entire life, that exciting thought filled her with pure joy instead of paralyzing fear. She was finally, completely, and wonderfully free. We've come to the end of today's story and I hope it touched your heart. Thank you for watching and remember to subscribe for more powerful and inspiring stories. See you in the next one.